right, so we are week 3 now of this series in which we are taking a look at our preferred future. That's what we're talking about here. What does the future of Hulen Street look like? And we are casting not a new vision, but I think a clearer vision for Hulen Street moving forward. Let's talk about what is a vision. Here's how we've defined what a vision is in the first place. So a vision is a shared image of a better future that captivates our imaginations, that captures our hearts, and here's the key, it calls us to action. And so we've been talking about what does our future look like? And I said last week, there's two ways you can paint that picture. You can paint that picture either through statistics or characteristics. Let me explain what I mean by that again, just so we're all clear, and that's why we've chosen the direction we're going. You can do it statistically, and you can say, hey, the future of Hulen Street Church, what does that look like? Well, we want to be a church of 10,000. We want to be a church that builds 5 more buildings. We want to be a church that plants 20 churches. We want to be a church that has 3 satellite campuses, right? Those are statistics. And those are statistics of a large, growing, healthy church, you might say, right? And I get that. I understand that. And a lot of guys do it that way, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I would prefer that we built a church on characteristics. What kind of church? Not what size of church we want to be, but what kind of church do we want to be? Because if you get the characteristics right, the statistics will take care of themselves. And so what you see in our vision statement is not a bunch of statistics, but you see characteristics, the characteristics of the kind of church we want to be. And here's what we talk about. We want to be a church and to partner with other churches that are irresistible to the unchurched, that are indispensable to the church, and that are, third, a blessing to our city. Now, what we're doing in these weeks here is we are talking about each one of those characteristics. We're tunneling down into every one of those. So last week, if you were not with us, you can go back and watch. What does it mean for us to be irresistible to the unchurched? This week, we move on to the second characteristic. What does it mean for us to be indispensable to the church? Now, you understand, we talk about this among the staff quite a bit. Because there is a tension that we feel. And it's a tension that we have consciously and intentionally chosen to live in. And it's the tension between trying to create a church that is irresistible to the unchurched, but not leaving the church behind, like providing still opportunities and environments and events that will help a follower of Jesus to go to the next level, to provide an environment that unchurched people feel comfortable in, but also at the same time to provide an environment that church people can grow in. And sometimes you can have churches that kind of fall off to one side or the other. We really do want to hold both of those in tension. So how do we do that? What does it mean for us to be indispensable to the church? Well, a lot of us have made in recent years about the increasing number of people who have edited faith out of their lives. And as a result, they've, of course, not just faith out of their lives, they've edited church out of their lives. And there's also another category of people who've not edited faith out of their lives, but they've still edited church out of their lives. So they still have a faith, or a faith that they would claim, but they do not have a church or a value for church or church attendance or church membership. And I know COVID has accelerated that, I think. It's kind of enhanced that, but it was a problem before COVID. When I talk to other pastors, we get together and get around the table. You know, we always kind of compare notes. What's going on at your church? What's going on at my church? And anymore now, when you always talk about what's happening in your church currently, you say, well, that was pre-COVID, right? So they say, well, how many people do you have coming to your small groups? Or how many kids do you have coming to your grade school ministry? And you say, well, pre-COVID, we had this. Post-COVID, we have this. So there's BC before COVID, there's AC after COVID. And we say, we keep throwing out that BC number, like the before COVID number, thinking like, okay, one of these days they're all gonna come back. And I don't know that that's the case. Why is that? Because here's what's happened, all right? Here's the one thing. Now I think there is a positive here, right? If there's a positive anything out of this, here's a positive, right? The positive is that COVID and all that came out of that gave us all an excused absence from everything. Right? We could back out of everything. Okay, we could back out of all these things. And what it did is allowed us to kind of take a harder look at our lives, at our schedules, and the things we are spending our time doing, And you get this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. When the pandemic strikes, you kind of get this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to whenever you're coming out on the other side of it, you get to reset the table. And you get to reprioritize your life. And you have all these families who before COVID, their lives were packed to the gills. Like they were packed, their schedules were packed, they're running all over the place, all these things that they had added onto their life. And then suddenly the world shuts down. You're like, you know what? I kind of like this freedom. I kind of like this flexibility. And so as you come out of COVID now, you get to kind of reset the table and go, I'm going to choose this. I want to put this here and put this here. And I'm going to edit some things out of my life to free up my schedule. And here's the thing, is that for a lot of people, they are doing that with church. Doing it with a lot of things. You look at it in our culture. Okay, just as an example, you type in the words, the Great Resignation into a Google search, and you're gonna come up with a ton of articles, because what's happening now, this is also something kind of on a corporate employee kind of level where people are deciding like, I don't have to work at this job anymore. I mean, what this has taught me is that life's too short and I need to do something else, or I don't like the way it was going, and I don't want to work in the office and all these things. And so there's this great resignation where a lot of people are quitting their jobs to go and do something else. And I think it's not just happening in the workforce, it's happening in church too. They're resigning, they're quitting. And they're making, when they come back out of COVID, they're kind of reprioritizing their life. And for a lot of people, church is either pushed to the bottom of the list or it is left off completely. And so this has been going on for a while. So why is that? Well, we have to be honest with what's actually happening. People are making a value judgment, and they are taking a hard look at their faith or their church attendance, and quite frankly, some of them have come to the conclusion that what church offers or what church provides was not worth the time or the effort that was required of it. That's really the heart of it. That's the core of it. What church offers or what church provides is not valuable enough. And listen, I can't say that it's not unexpected. So you guys know I was on break over the summer, and so you know, on that break, we went to church, right? We went to a lot of churches, a lot of different churches. We wanted to see different churches. We never get to do that. And but there was a little bit of a hiccup in the schedule, and so the elders approved an extra Sunday for me to be off, right? This was not a part of the original plan, which means that I didn't put a church into that schedule at that moment. So here we are at the last Sunday. We're like, what are we going to do? And we thought, well, okay, Sunday, it's one Sunday, last Sunday of the break, last Sunday of the summer really for us. Let's just, let's take a day, right? And we did, right? We got up late, ended up at a restaurant, had a great brunch, me, Leslie, Ellie. And it was awesome, right? It was great. You guys were here worshiping, and we're like, man, pancakes are amazing, right? And Leslie and I were sitting there at the table, and we're looking around like, I get it a little bit, right? I kind of get it. I understand why people might make that decision, to have some of this flexibility, have some of this freedom. Now, it's not something you can actually, if you're a Christ follower, you can do that, but you can't sustain that. And I wouldn't want to sustain that. But I think it gave me a vision of why. I mean, that restaurant was packed. There was a wait list, right? When was the last time we had a wait list here, guys? Jen's not at the door going, it's going to be a 20-minute wait till you get into a seat, right? It doesn't happen here, but it's everywhere else. And I tell you that story because I just want to say I kind of get it. I kind of understand it. I understand when people are making that value judgment. So what do we do about it? Well, let me tell you what we're not going to do. Number one, we're not going to blame them. We're not going to blame them because that's what we have done in the past. I think that's what the church has been guilty of in the past. We blame those that stop coming, and because it's their problem, right? It shows a lack of commitment. It shows a lack of devotion. It shows a lack of character, whatever you want to call it. We're going to blame them for not coming to church because it's their problem. And really what that is, it's a little bit of a self-defense mechanism. So we really don't have to look at ourselves. So we don't really have to examine ourselves and find out what's really wrong. I mean, if we're not providing or offering something that truly is valuable, we have the best news, and I think we have the best product out there, But if we're not helping people understand what that actually is, that it's worth their time and their money, their very lives, think about that, their very lives. If we've not communicated that, that's on us, not on them. Really. But I think we want to blame them so we don't have to take a hard look at ourselves. We're not going to do that. As we hold this value up of church being indispensable to the church, first thing we're not going to do is we are not going to blame those who've chosen to edit church and out of their lives. Okay, we're going to look at ourselves first. Second thing we're not going to do is we're not going to blame them, and we're not going to guilt you, those of you who are coming, right? We're not going to get you to keep coming out of coercion and manipulation and legalism. And I mean, you're thinking right now like, well, how are you going to get us to keep coming? Because that's the only tools you've ever had in your toolbox. And to be honest, that's probably true. There's been a lot of that. But listen, here's what I don't want to have happen. I don't want your church attendance to generate more stress or anxiety in your life. Church is a place you should come to be free from stress and anxiety. We're not trying to add more or pile more on to that. So how do we do that, right? How do we actually make this thing? How do we convince people who have put their faith in Jesus that what we do here every single week, this is worth it. It's worth every bit of it. Well, I'm not sure how that's going to exactly play out, but here's what we're going to do in general. We're going to continue to teach and to hold up the value of church. We're going to remind our partners of the significance of the simple yet powerful act of just showing up. Now, let me just say right now, some of you are here and you're just investigating Hulen Street Church, and not only you're investigating Hulen Street Church, you say, I'm not even a Christian, I'm not even a Christ follower, I'm just investigating Christianity. You know what? Here's the deal. You are off the hook today, right? You really are. I don't expect that of you. I can't expect that of you. You've not made that decision. And so listen, you're completely off the hook. You get to watch. Like, we're going to have a little bit of a talk between me and our church partners, right? The believers in the room. And we're going to talk about what does it mean to be a church. And here's what's great for you. If you're out there and you're watching online or you're here and investigating in the room, you get to kind of watch. You get to be a fly on the wall, and you're like, oh, what's this all about? What is church? Why is church valuable? What is church about? Why should I come to church on a regular basis? And you get to be here. You get to watch. Perfect Sunday for you, okay? So we want to hold up that value as much as we possibly can. Listen, if you're a partner with us, you're a Christ follower, I want you to feel like, let me back up. What I don't want you to feel is I don't want you to feel like you have to be here. I really just want to develop a desire to be here in you. I want you to become convinced that church is both a place you need to be and a place you are wanted, right? That you are needed, right? A place you want to be and a place you are wanted. A place you need to be and a place where you are needed. Because listen, you are absolutely essential. Now, I know you might not feel that way. I think a lot of people, they back out of church because they just don't feel like they're important. They don't feel like that they have a value, that they don't bring anything to it. I'm just sitting in the audience. What am I doing? What am I contributing? That I don't have any real value. I am non-essential personnel when it comes to church. And nothing could be further from the truth. And that's what I want to convince you of today. It doesn't matter who you are, where you're from, what your background is. If you are a partner of Hulen Street Church, you are absolutely essential to who we are as a church and to what we are trying to accomplish as a church. A couple weeks ago, I took a quick look at one of Paul's most favorite illustrations, one of his favorite metaphors that he uses to describe a healthy church. He uses it in several places in his writings, but today we're going to look at a place where he uses it in a book called 1 Corinthians. So let me just back up, just in case you don't know. Paul was an early Christian who went around pretty much the known world at the time and planted a bunch of churches, would go and would tell people about Jesus, and they would put their faith in him, and he would put these guys together into a church and get them propped up on their feet, and then he would kind of move on to the next place. So he just kind of moved all around and just started churches, kind of like an entrepreneur, right? He's going around starting churches, though. And then these churches, they're still new, and they're still got these young Christians in them, and he has to give them some instruction. And so he has to write letters back to them, and these letters usually address an issue. Like, think about it this way. To write a letter in that culture was very time and economically intensive, right? It required resources that not everybody had, and it took a long time to get from one place to the next. So when you wrote a letter, you needed to write that letter, right? It was a big deal. So there was always a reason for these letters. There was always an occasion for these letters. And so sometimes when you read some of those letters that Paul wrote to these churches, he doesn't often explicitly come out and say, hey, this is the issue, and this is what I'm going to address. He just starts addressing it to them like he would in a normal situation, because, I think he may not even at that moment realize we'd still be reading these letters. And so he implies the reason, but doesn't always come out and say it. So we have to read between the lines sometimes, and we have to reverse engineer what's going on in order to understand why he's writing this letter. And so when you look at this place called Corinth, this little church in this place called Corinth, and what you're going to find is what's apparently going on here is that this church is about as broken, it's about as dysfunctional, as toxic as any church that has ever existed. Lots of stuff going on. Now, we're only going to talk about one of their problems today. They got a lot of problems. We're going to talk about one of them. One of the problems, one author described this way. He said the problem with the Corinthian church is the same problem with a lot of churches. They were divided when they should have been united, and they tried to be uniform when they should have been diverse. Now, how are they trying to be uniform when they should have been diverse? Okay, one thing you have to understand, if you don't already, is that we all have gifts and abilities and talents. And we call them gifts because, especially as Christians, we call them gifts because we are assuming that if you have a special ability or talent, that it is more than a product of just your DNA, that God has implanted that gift or ability or talent in you, and he intends for you to use that gift to serve him and to serve other people. He equipped you to contribute in certain ways. And it says this, and this is what Paul says to the Corinthian church. He distributes them, all right, them being gifts. He distributes them to each one. All right, nobody's left off the list. Everybody gets a gift. All right, there's no second-class citizens here. Everybody gets a gift. He gives them to each one as he determines. Now, I want you to hold that on. That is the theme that's going to run throughout this passage. That God is the one distributing. He's doing it consciously. He's doing it intentionally. He's doing it strategically. God is distributing the gifts to all of the people in the church in order for that church to accomplish its purpose or fulfill its mission. Peter comes along. He understands this. Peter says, each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others. That's why it's there. Use your gift to serve others. Now, here's the thing. Some gifts, by their very nature, are going to be much more public. They're going to be much more forward-facing, right? You're going to exercise your gift, and you're going to get some attention for that gift. I have one of those gifts, right? Just by nature, I have a gift of communication, of teaching, talking, preaching. And so because of that, I am seen, right? Now, here's the problem with that. A lot of times they would equate some of those public, forward-facing gifts as gifts of more value. Right? Those are more significant gifts. Those are more important gifts. And then they would take it to the next level and say, if you got one of those gifts, that was a sign of God's favor on that person, which meant that if they had that gift, that person would become more important. They would become more valuable. And somehow these people were more loved by God, right? These are the people that are like, there's this class of citizens in the church, and some of them have the public gifts, and some of them have the private gifts, and the guys with the public gifts, they're kind of out in front, and they get all the attention. And the problem is everybody wants a little bit of attention, right? A lot of us do. And so a lot of these Corinthian Christians, they had these gifts, but here's the problem. They didn't look at their gifts as a way to serve other people. They wanted their gift to serve them. And so when they didn't get one of those public gifts, well, they became jealous and envious, and they all tried to forget the gift. They all tried to exercise the gift that they wanted, not the gift that they were given. And so what you had here is like the Corinthian church, think of it this way. They were a football team in which everybody on the team wanted to play quarterback. Nobody wanted to be on the line. Nobody wanted to be a running back. Nobody wanted to be a receiver. They all wanted to play quarterback. And it's causing a great deal of trouble in this church. They were all, that's what he said, they were trying to be uniform, right? They all wanted the same gift because they all wanted the forward-facing public gift when they should have been diverse. They should have recognized and leaned into the diversity of all of their gifts. And so Paul uses the picture of a body, of a human body, of a healthy body, to communicate what does a healthy church look like. And a healthy church, like a healthy body, requires diversity. In fact, if you have a lack of diversity in your body, that is a symptom of a really terrible problem. Like, think about a human body. If you have a disproportionate number of the same kinds of cells in a body, what's that called? Cancer. I heard it. Yeah, that's exactly right. So that's a disease when you have a bunch of the same kinds of cells. Now, here's the thing. When we hear the word diversity, we automatically go to a racial or social, ethnic or financial or economic diversity, right? And I understand that. That's the world we live in right now. Paul's not talking about that, right? Paul's not talking about that kind of diversity. He's talking not about a diversity of people and their ethnicities or their race. He's talking about a diversity of gifts. And the reason he's not talking about a diversity of people and races and ethnicities is because that's already happening in the church. He has assumed that. Let me show you what I mean. He says, just as a body, though one has many parts, but all of its parts form one body, so it is with Christ. For we were all baptized by one Spirit. He uses that idea. So when we all became Christians, we were all baptized by one Spirit to form one body. When we became a Christian, we were grafted into the body. And then he says this, whether Jews or Gentiles, slave or free. So Paul is assuming that the church is already made up of. The church is already full of racial, ethnic, and social diversity. So what is so extraordinary today is actually very ordinary then. We still need that diversity, that racial, ethnic diversity. I'm not setting that aside. I just want you to understand what he's talking about. When we're going for diversity, the church in that day was already a fantastic mix of all kinds of people and all kinds of colors and all kinds of backgrounds and all kinds of histories and religions even. But what they don't have diversity on, what they need diversity on, is not in race, but in gift. They need this mix of gifts. So every church has this fantastic mix of people, but it's also an intentional mix of gifts. That's what Paul says. He distributed them as he determined. And the result is what? The result in verse 14, it says, the body is not made up of one part, but many. The problem isn't that there are people in the church that they don't like. The problem is they have gifts that they don't want. And it's causing a real problem in this church. It's causing a lot of disruption. It's causing a lot of disunity. And it's causing a lot of people just to walk away. Let me show you what I mean. Look at verse 15. Now, if the foot should say, because I'm not a hand, I do not belong to the body, it would not for that reason stop being a part of the body. And if the ear should say, because I am not an eye, I do not belong to the body, it would not for that reason stop being a part of the body. So apparently, he says this twice, he repeats it, and it's like he's hearing or he's repeating words that have come to him. It's like what's happening in this church is they don't like their gifts, and they don't like what they've received, and so because of that, they don't want to be a part of it. I don't belong there anymore. I'm not valuable, I'm not significant, I'm not important, so I don't need to show up, right? I'm going to take my ball, and I'm going to go home. I don't belong. And Paul says, that's ridiculous. You know, just because you say I don't belong there doesn't mean you stop being what you already are. And now you're just an eye without a body, or now you're just an ear without a body, or now you're just a hand without a body. You've basically, what they're doing is they have amputated themselves out of their own selfishness, out of their own personal agendas, they are amputating themselves out of the body. That's what a lot of people are doing today. I'm not important. I'm not significant. I don't have anything to contribute. I'm not a hand. I'm not an eye. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to stop going because it's not important. It's not valuable for me to be there. I can show up and they're just going to continue going on. Nobody will miss me if I am gone because my gift is unimportant. My role is insignificant. So I am checking out. They're just walking away because they don't need me. And Paul says, that's ridiculous. That's the craziest thing I've heard. That makes no logical sense. And so what he does is he begins to make an argument about why every part of the body is absolutely essential. He says this in verse 17, if the whole body were an eye, where would the sense of hearing be? And if the whole body were an ear, where would the sense of smell be? His point is this, a body cannot flourish, it cannot function if it has too many of the same parts or if it has too few of any of its parts. And he goes in verse 18, he says, but in fact, again, here's the theme, God has placed the parts in the body, every one of them. Again, God has distributed, God has placed, God has given to each one of us something to be used. In verse 19, he says, if they were all one part, where would the body be? As it is, there are many parts, but one body. He just keeps hammering around this idea. Many parts, one body. Many parts, one body. You know what that means? If God is actively distributing these gifts, that means Hulen Street Church has everything we need to do anything God calls us to do. You know that? We have no excuse. Now, let me add to that. We have everything we need to do anything God calls us to do if we all show up and we're all engaged. We're all a part of this. Okay, so last week, we took the guys to Top Golf for the men's event, right? A lot of you guys were there. You know what I learned last week? I learned last week that Hulen Street is not a golfing church. That's what I learned. There was a lot of ugly golf swings that day. I mean, we would have had a better result if you handed a club to a newborn giraffe. It would have, that would have been better, right? And so I'm there talking, and I count myself in there, right? I'm right there with a lot of those guys, right? There's a few guys that know what they're doing, but most of us really don't, and it was really embarrassing. And so I was right there watching all of it, and I was talking to a guy that I brought, and he said, you know, and he'd never played golf before. He goes, but here's what's funny. He makes this observation. Then you just get one hit. And it's like this one moment where all of it works together, right? This one magic moment where there is complete unity and harmony among all the parts of the body, where the mechanics all flow all together, and you lay that club against that ball and it just sails. And there's just this sound, there's this feeling, it's just this deep satisfaction. In fact, I've heard golfers say, you go out for a round of golf, there's only one shot every round that keeps you coming back. And it's that feeling, that fulfillment, that satisfaction when all the parts and pieces are working in harmony and unity to get a result. That's what we're looking for. That's what we want. Listen, you could say, well, when I don't show up, the church survives, right? When I don't show up, everything seems to be going okay, right? And I get it, right? A body can lose an arm, but that body is then weakened. The body's able to continue to live without the arm, but it's not ever able to function as efficiently and as effectively as it did before. Let me take that another step. What happens to the arm if it's disconnected from the body? It dies. So you have all these people that aren't satisfied with who they are in the church or what role they play in the church, and they're essentially amputating, if you take Paul's metaphor, they are amputating themselves off of the body, and they are weakening the body, and they are killing themselves. Every part contributes to the body's ability to function. It contributes to, not only that, listen, every part contributes to the body's ability to function, but think about this. It's like a symbiotic relationship. Every part contributes to every other part's ability to flourish. I need you. I need you as much as you need me. I know I have a position that's more public and forward-facing. I get it. But that doesn't mean I don't need every single one of you. We need each other. We need to show up every week for each other. Because no one of us is sacrificial. Like, nobody is not essential. Let me show you what I mean. I got a little bit of a picture here I wanted to show you. We found this online. We thought, how can we display this, right? And maybe I can take this off without ruining it. Okay, so this is a kid's toy that we found online, right? It's got all these parts and pieces. You can see it. It's very intricate, very involved. You turn it on, and it moves this chain, and it brings these little balls up to the top, right? Let's see if this works. And the ball, think about the ball like our mission, right? It's what we're called to do, what we're supposed to be. And so the ball makes its way through the whole thing, and every time it goes all the way through, right, it's satisfying. You're fulfilling that purpose, right? Awesome. It's great. Now, here's the thing. This thing is made up of hundreds of different little parts. Now, you're going to see some of these parts more than others, right? You see the little springboard, you see the basket, you see the teeter-totter, right? The funnel, all these things. You see the track, you even see the chain. But what you don't often notice is this little supporting piece right here. You don't really notice it. It's kind of playing, but it's playing a significant role because without this piece, it won't hold up the springboard, or these pieces won't hold up the basket, and it won't hold them in the right place. And so everything has to work together for this thing to function properly. And if I start taking parts and pieces off of this thing, eventually it's going to stop working. And eventually it's just going to fall apart. And then what do you have? You just have a mess of pieces and no real purpose behind it. This is us, right? Now, every illustration, no matter how good it is, every illustration falls apart at some point. This one does too, right? Here's where this one falls apart. That's just a machine, right? That's just a machine, and no matter how long I let this machine run, all of those parts and pieces will never be any greater than they currently are. You understand? They'll never grow. They'll never become anything else. But you have the ability to grow. See, when you contribute in a part of this, it's not just making the church better, it makes you better, makes you greater. We don't just function because you show up. We flourish, both corporately and individually, when you show up. And there's not a part of you, there's not one of you that is not needed in order to make this happen, in order to make any of this happen. See, if you're not here, you don't have the chance to comfort someone who's in pain. You're not going to be here to hug the one who is lonely. You're not going to be here to listen to the one who is struggling. You're not going to be here to talk to the one who is confused or to pray for the one who is visiting, to welcome the one who is seeking. Now, you play a part here, but at the same time, you won't be here to be able to give, but you won't be here to be able to receive. If you're not here, not only can you not comfort someone, but you can't be comforted by anyone. And if you're not here, you can't encourage someone, but you can't be encouraged by someone. And if you're not here, you can't serve, but at the same time, you can't be served when you need to be served. When we don't show up, when we don't have this value, when our attitude is, hey, as long as nothing else is going on, I might go to church, right? We take away the opportunity of you playing a pivotal role in someone else's faith journey. Or you take away the opportunity of you having a pivotal moment in your own faith journey if you're not here. I think sometimes the regularity of Sunday gets in the way of our understanding of just how significant Sundays are. Every Sunday is packed with eternal potential. And I think we forget that because they come every week. Every single week. They don't feel significant when they happen weekly. But still, what does Jesus promise? He says, for wherever 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there I am. Right? What does that mean? That means when you have a couple people get together with purpose, with intentionality, in his name, which is what we do, what does he say? I'm there. Guys, stop and understand. That is a massive promise because his presence alone is what unpacks an amazing amount of potential. What could happen here every week? We've got to figure out how to make that significant again. So let's go back to where this started. Here's what I love about this, because there is a connection here between what Paul is saying to this Corinthian church, right? And he's trying to get them to understand, listen, I know you didn't get the gift you wanted, but you're still valuable. I know you didn't get the gift you wanted, but you're still significant. You play a part in this. You need to show up for this. You can't just amputate yourself off of the body and not hurt the body or yourself. But remember who he's talking to. He's talking to these people who are wanting to advance their own agenda, right? They want value. They want significance. They want to count for something. They want a gift that they don't have. And really, what I said before, it's really all about them. They are using the church and their gifting as a platform to advance themselves and their own agenda. And at the end of that chapter, he says, this is what you're doing, right? This is how you're reaching for gifts that aren't yours to try to be somebody that you're not because you think that makes you somehow more significant or more valuable. And then he wraps it all up and he says, but I'm going to show you the most excellent way. I'm going to show you a different way, a unique way. I'm going to show you the most excellent way. And so he gives them a contrast between how they're acting in chapter 12 to how they should act in chapter 13. Some of us have never connected these two dots, and I want to show you how they work together right now, because he says, I'm going to show you the most excellent way. Then you turn the page, and you start in verse 13, and you come to a passage you've known probably forever, but you've never known it in this light. And he says, if I speak in the tongues of men or of angels, but do not have love, I am only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and I can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have a faith that can move mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. If I give all that I possess to the poor and give over my body to hardship, that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. And it does not boast. It is not proud. Why is he writing that? Because that's what they are doing. That's why their church is so broken and dysfunctional. He says, it does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. What is he doing? He's describing the state of their church. And he says, love does not delight in evil, but it rejoices with truth that always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails. You know what that means? It means love shows up every time. Love doesn't quit and run. Love doesn't disconnect when it doesn't go well for them. Love shows up every single time. He says, you're going to show up, and listen, he said, you don't show up out of ambition, and you don't show up out of obligation. Those will never sustain you. What he's saying is, the most excellent way is, we show up for one another out of affection, because we love each other, and we serve each other. And it doesn't matter what gift I have or don't have. That doesn't, my place is secure. Who I am in Christ is secure. And there isn't any gift or ability that's any more valuable than another. We all have to come together and play our part, though. One of my favorite Christmas movies, we watch it every year, it's actually a modern version of It's a Wonderful Life. It's called Family Man. It stars Nicolas Cage and Téa Leoni. Nick Cage plays a guy named Jack Campbell, and Téa Leoni plays Kate Campbell. And if you've not seen it, it's 21 years old. So you had your chance, so I'm going to tell you the story, all right? So the whole story, the movie is bookended by two scenes at an airport. The movie begins at the airport. The movie ends at the airport. Now, in the opening scene, Jack Campbell's a young man. He just finished college. He's received this really sought-after, highly prestigious internship with Barclays Bank. Clearly, this is a man who's going somewhere. He's a man of great talent and ability. He's going to have success in his life. And he's got this beautiful girlfriend who he clearly loves a lot. And she's there to see him off. And as he turns to get on the plane, she stops him. She pulls him back. She says, Jack, don't go. Don't go. Just stay here. Let's stay here. And he says, no. Nobody thinks clearly at the airport. Everybody's emotional at the airport. We have a plan, right? We have a plan, and we're going to stick to the plan. And she says, Jack, forget the plan. Forget the plan. She says, I choose us. I choose us. That scene ends. The next scene opens. Jack Campbell, 13 years later, waking up in a high-rise penthouse apartment. Clearly, he is a man who has made his way in the world. He is very wealthy, highly successful, drives a Ferrari, works at this amazing place, right? He has done well for himself. He has followed his plan. He has executed his plan to a T. But he is utterly alone. And then by a strange turn of events, he is given a glimpse of what his life would look like had he not gotten on that plane 13 years earlier. Christmas morning, he wakes up, and he's no longer in his penthouse apartment. He's in a strange house in a strange bed, and he looks across, and it's Kate, the girl he left at the airport. But now they're married, and not only are they married, they have 2 kids out of nowhere. I mean, you can imagine his mind is about to explode. He runs out of the house, tries to reassemble his old life, but it doesn't work. Finds out that had he said yes at the airport, he would have been married to Kate, they would have had 2 kids, and he was selling tires, retail, in New Jersey. This was not the life he signed up for. And so the whole movie, it's him resenting this life and resisting this life and trying to get back to his old life until he finally realizes this is the life he really wanted. This wife, these kids, living in the suburbs of New Jersey, even selling tires. This is the life he really wants. But it's just a glimpse, and a glimpse by its very nature is always temporary. And so he wakes up again the next morning, and he's back in that cold, empty penthouse apartment. He's got his Ferrari, he's got his money, he's got his clothes, he's got everything he could have, but he doesn't have what he really wants. And he goes looking for Kate. And he finds her. It's the last scene of the movie. He finds her at the airport. I love this scene. He finds her at the airport. And he tries to get her, as she's about to get on a plane, because she's now a very successful, very wealthy lawyer. She's going to go to Paris to head up her firm's new office in Paris. And so she's going to get on the plane, and he's there, and he looks like he's out of his mind. And he's like, Kate, have coffee with me. And she's like, what, are you crazy? I mean, I've got closure. If you're looking for closure, Jack, I'm fine. Get on with your life. And then he stops, and as she's about to get on the plane, he starts calling out to her, and he starts describing to her their life together. He describes their kids. He describes their home. And he describes their love for one another, their deep love for one another. And it stops her. And what does he do? He's painting for her a picture of a preferred future. He's giving her a vision of what life could be. And it captures her attention. And she turns, and he walks up to her, and he looks at her, and he says this. He says, I have seen what we can be like together, and I choose us. Hulen Street Church, I have seen what we can be like together, and I choose us. I hope you are beginning to see what we can be like together, and you choose us. And we choose each other every single week. And we show up for each other. You know why? Because love never fails. Let's pray together. God, help us to know who we are and what part we play in all of this. If we've not yet discovered it, help us to discover our role, our gift, our ability, and help us to leverage it as much as we possibly can for your glory and your purposes, your kingdom. And it is through your church that you are bringing the gospel to the world. as we are getting clarity on who we are as a church, help us individually to have clarity on what part we play in this preferred vision of our better future. What part do we play as we try to become an irresistible church? What part do we play as we all work together to become an indispensable church? What part do we play, God? Help us to see it in how we become a blessing to our city. God, get us out of our seats and into the game, ready to play whatever part, whatever role you have assigned to us. You have distributed these roles, these gifts. You've brought us together for this moment, this place, this time, for this city. We have all that we are. We have all that we need. You made sure of it. Help us to find our place and lean hard into it. Help us to become that church you're calling us to be. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
And on the day you call me in to heaven's sweet embrace, I'll see your scars, your open arms, the beauty of your face. Through tears of joy,